Chihee Kim, welcome to the show. How's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me on.
We are so
Excited.
excited
Absolutely.
to
This is
dive into Alchemy, a little bit of you, a little bit of infrastructure that moves billions at scale. I'm reading the current website. It's been fun to see the evolution of Alchemy. Alchemy's been around for so many years. I've been following this for a long time, and I'm just looking forward to getting the current update on how you're thinking about things.
Definitely. Where would you like me to start?
It's a great
ooh,
question. How long have you been with the firm, and how have you seen it evolve since you've been there?
Yeah. Great. So I am Chihee Kim. I lead strategic partnerships at Alchemy. Very simply, we enable developer teams to build on blockchains, right, without running all the infrastructure themselves. And these teams range from like crypto native startups and AI companies all the way to established financial institutions like a major bank. And we've been doing this for almost a decade, if you can believe. And I have been with the company since the end of 2025. In terms of just like my career journey, I wanted to highlight that the thing that I personally keep coming back to for like, let's say the last 20 years of my career, like really comes down to one simple question. And that is, who gets financial access and who doesn't, right? And I started my career in banking and asset management and then spent nearly a decade at MSCI building, the indexes that sit underneath ETFs. And so when you buy an ETF, right, say an emerging markets fund or, the S&P 500 fund, there's an index sitting underneath that fund defining what's actually in it. And so it's passively tracking an index. There's no active bet being made, right? And that work is part of what makes, ETFs possible, right? At the prices that like people like you and me can actually, buy them
yeah.
at. 15 years ago, if you wanted to, get into a diversified portfolio, you pretty much had to be, wealthy enough to invest. And the portfolio likely had some, really high minimum, or high, like hefty management fee. And so ETFs really cracked that open. And now really anybody with a brokerage account can buy them. And it's not just about the price, right? It's also about the kinds of exposures you can get. So now you can get, very specific sectors, you can get into very specific
Mm.
international markets. There are factor strategies, currency hedge exposures, and so on and so forth. And so these used to be the domain of primarily large institutional investors. And now really anyone can take those same positions and really ETFs cracked open that access.
So
Um,
sorry.
oh no, go ahead.
I was gonna ask just your mandate now. So, your goal has always been to just open the aperture for financial access. And coming into Alchemy, where's your current mandate if you're going out and forming strategic partnerships? And I think the big focus right now, we just have this conversation quite frequently with agentic payments is where does AI fit into maybe your mandate outside of just personally, but even professionally within Alchemy for empowering these teams, with agentic payments.
Yeah. At Alchemy, because of what's happening now in crypto and AI, really, it's in my mind, like this next version of the same story, right? Anyone with an internet connection anywhere in the world can participate in the financial system. And to me, that's ultimate financial access, right? There is not it's not going to be easy, right? There are a lot of challenges. And a lot of different types of companies and folks are coming into the space. And so I would say, and I'm happy to talk about all the projects that we're doing on the agentic side and how we're thinking about it. But what really gives me a lot of hope, right, is that we're seeing some real activity and a lot of people building. And I'll just take a step back and say, like, activity wise, and this is not just about institutions building, but it's about like the everyday people kind of interacting on financial platforms. Like, you've covered this in prior segments, like stablecoin payments have hit, an all-time high, right? And B2B cross-border payments alone, I think in the last year, grew over 700%. And that's like huge, right? Because people and
Mm.
businesses are like now actually able to send money efficiently across borders
Yeah.
and back without having to go through these like chains of like local correspondent banks, like taking fees, right, at every jump. And someone in Argentina can now actually hold an account, right, and send a payment and get, paid in dollars and, without ever opening a bank account. And then you're like seeing, and I'll talk about, the agentic stuff like soon, but like you're also seeing like on-chain derivatives, right, take off.
Yeah.
Hyperliquid, let's just take that as an example, like processed, I just read $600 billion in perp volume in Q1 of this year. And that's like volume that didn't even exist a couple years ago. And so now everyday traders are accessing leverage products that used to be like gated, for institutions
Yeah.
and accredited investors, qualified investors. And then there's the predictions markets. YZ kind of legitimized it further, right, by, saying we're going to invest up to $2 billion. And so now we've got like liquid global markets on outcomes, right? Everything from elections to sports to macro events. And, that's really opened up investing to a wider set of people than ever before. And then there's, AI agents, right? Agents are, not just helping us like with our everyday like reasoning through chat, but they're actually starting to move money and transact. And we're just at the tip of the iceberg, in my opinion. This massive change in, who gets to participate and get access is, in my mind, like bigger than anything I've seen so far in my career. And it's really exciting that like crypto and AI together are enabling that access.
What question for you? So, sort of a two-part question. Like, sounds like you're around 6 months into the journey at Alchemy. What was the thing about the company that made you, after such a awesome career in finance, what was it about Alchemy that originally really drove you to want to be there? What was that? There are a lot of companies fighting this infrastructure layer war and trying to like be a winner in this conversation. What was it about Alchemy that felt like the winning strategy for you?
Yeah. So, there are two things. First, like after my very institutional finance journey and experience, I ended up co-founding a financial wellness startup.
Hmm.
And, the thing that I kept noticing, the reason why we started it was that like people are trying to figure out how to like manage their money completely on their own, right? Personal finance, isn't taught in schools and it's not really talked about at home in any serious or kind of important way. And, a lot of the products that are out there are difficult to use or full of jargon. And so at Finney, we built a platform that was rolled out to employers for their employees, like helping them to like manage their everyday financial decisions. And, we sold it. Well, we served probably over, 60,000 employees, close to 70,000 employees before we sold it to Origin Financial a couple years ago. And so like knew that like my next journey after that had to align in terms of vision, right? Financial access. I wanted to also go to a startup within the blockchain space. At Finney, at my startup, we also helped a lot of employees like better understand what crypto meant, right? It's not just about Doge, right? It's not about the meme coins, right? There's like an infrastructure called blockchain that can be quite transformational. And so, I found Alchemy, actually I saw Nikhil, the CEO, speak on a NYSE like podcast, and just everything he said about, the infrastructure space really resonated with me. And I thought that would be like the right next step. Culturally, Alchemy is, fast moving. They're very innovative. They're a leader in the space as it relates to like blockchain. And now with AI, I mean, like the sky's the limit. That's like the short version of the story.
Yeah, excited to get into AI and the specific opportunity there. We're just looking here at some updated numbers just to call out how impactful Alchemy is and has been. 1 trillion transactions every year, 100 million humans using crypto, 1 billion gasless transactions processed. This is a ton of scale here, 99.99% uptime. When you look at the numbers, there's just a lot to be proud of. How does the conversation evolve now from just crypto and crypto infrastructure into how agents are going to be using things like stablecoins or crypto generally? And why is Alchemy in your mind posed to win that conversation or be a part of that at this point?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So maybe I'll just take a step back, right? What Alchemy simply stated does is that If you want to build something on a blockchain, you need a way for your application, right, to talk to that chain. And so that means to read what's happening, send transactions, see balance updates, and, get notified when payments get confirmed and, to pull historical records for things like accounting or reporting. And we make it really possible for any team building, right? Again, like whether they're a crypto native startup or a major bank, right, to build on chain without having to run all of that infrastructure themselves. To share a few more stats, like there are tens of thousands of teams building on Alchemy today, and we support more than 100 blockchain networks. And so, like, what does that mean? Let's say for like a payments company, right? They want to send payments and stable coins, or maybe they're issuing stable coins. They need to know when transactions hit, right? Or how funds move across different chains without their users having to think about what chain they're actually on. You talked about you brought up gas abstraction, gas sponsorship, and through what we call gas abstraction, right? Alchemy can sponsor the gas on our customers' behalf for their customers and then bills them in dollars at the end of the month. They never have to hold crypto on their balance sheet, and we make all of that, work fast and reliably. And having done so in it over the last 10 years, like, you know, we're the leader in the space, right? And, if you take specific customers of ours, like Connexus by JP Morgan and World, both customers using different parts of our stack. For JP Morgan, we're the raw infrastructure, right? The node layer, the gas abstraction, the controls that make running their deposit token, let's say on a public chain, reliable and fast for a
Mhm.
regulated entity. But World took a different path, right? They built their own L2 chain, the World chain, and we're the infrastructure powering it. So, one customer puts their assets on the public chain, and we, build the infrastructure, to allow that to run reliably. And then another builds the chain itself, and Alchemy is the infrastructure for both. And I think the broader point here is that like different companies building on chain want different levels of control over their stack, and some of them want the raw infrastructure and they'll build everything themselves. Other want more
Mm.
abstracted product layers, right? Even when they're still trying to figure out maybe exactly what they need. And so our job is to meet them where they are. And so on the agentic side, right, that leads me to the agentic side. I think, philosophically, I know the leadership has said this, and I think about this all the time. And the reason crypto and AI together is so interesting is that each fixes a problem that the other one has. So crypto itself, right, has been around for say 15 years, and the user experience for humans has been really bad. It's been tough, right? There's self custody, there's seed phrases, these gas fees, the switching chains, and humans want all of that abstracted away. We want banks and our apps to actually do that for us. But AI agents really don't care about that user friction. They want programmatic access, 24/7 availability, global reach instantly, deterministic settlement, right? The things that make crypto hard for humans make it pretty perfect for software. And so maybe crypto was never meant for humans. Maybe it was always for AI.
Whoa.
And so it's
Well,
interesting when you
do you
think
believe
about it.
that? Do you think that's where we're going?
Do you think that's where we're going? Why, do you have doubts about that? Or have your guests have
No, I don't. I personally agree with you in terms of the settlement layer and how value is going to be moving around. I think, yeah, we're definitely hitting a moment where it's like there will be more agents than humans. And I do believe that when it comes to moving transactions or making financial decisions on a per transaction basis, like I also agree that agents will be doing that on a more like transaction
Yeah.
by transaction basis. I don't know when that will tip, but I've been in the last 6 months pretty blown away by how fast we are moving the conversation from stablecoins into agentic commerce. So I agree with you. What
But
do you think,
I
Zach?
think where we're trying to think through is what are all these different types of flows that agentic payments are actually being involved in? Is this treasury movement? Is this agentic workflows for SMBs so they can balance their books at the end of the day? Is this is this my mom and dad on ChatGPT saying, "Hey, go book me a flight," and they're going to now go be able to book a flight? Or is it trading? We saw Robinhood launch their MCP recently. Is it for trading in the terminal, and is it going to be more of an investing focus to manage my personal finances? And I think just with where AI currently is, when we use it for most of our day to day life, it's this very isolated. How do I personally use it? Not how am I using it to run a business? We've seen it with Paperclip and all these tools that it's going there, but I don't think it's there all the way. And I think sometimes it's really hard to kind of open up your I guess open up your mind on that philosophical point too. How much of payments can actually AI consume and do, which I think leads well into the question of so what is real and what's not real right now, especially on this enterprise scale.
Yeah, it's a great direction to talk about now. I mean, yeah, so like what does this actually look like in real life, right? And from our perspective, that's an agent, right? Today, paying for a data feed, right? That's an agent, settling, a vendor invoice. That's an agent, hedging a position. And I think when we talk about that, and by the way, like everything you mentioned, like all of the above, like all of those use cases that you
Yeah.
shared, right? But each of these use cases means that the agent needs an account, right, that holds value, signs a transaction, and follows some rules that its like operator gave it. And that account today is essentially a wallet. And so the wallet is the piece that decides like who controls what an agent can do. It's not the model. And in fact, we just shipped this at Alchemy earlier this month. Today, like an AI coding agent like Claude, running on a developer's machine can send a payment on chain, say swap one token for another, like or bridge across chains, all from the terminal. And the agent never holds the wallet's private key. The developer approves like a scoped
Mhm.
time-bound session, and the agent then uses that session to act. And the developer can revoke access with one click. And so the human stays in control of the wallet and the agent gets a session. Now, today, that's a developer tool, right? It's for folks
Right.
building coding workflows. But I think what's really, really kind of interesting here is that the underlying primitive is very applicable for SMBs all the way up to institutional and enterprise like companies. So once you have a clean model where agents can act through these like scoped revocable sessions on top of, say, like a wallet, somebody else's is custodying, you can apply that anywhere you want agents to do something without giving them the keys. And so to your earlier
Mm.
point, that's like, a bank giving its internal AI workflow access to a treasury wallet or AI agent access to a customer spending account with the customer in control. And so
Yeah.
like seeing like all these like use cases, they're very narrow, they're very scattery, but like the primitive can scale and it can be very powerful.
I just think that the tension I feel when I think about this primitive, I know so many people that their preferred payment method is still a check. Like if you have to pay them, they're like, just mail me a check, right? Um, ACH and wire transfer.
Zach, who do you think of when you say that?
Yeah.
I think of quite a few people I know in some other work that I've helped associates with. I would say it's not like a handful of people. That's the thing. Like it's if you reach out to 5 people, it's 3 of them that like if their business still needs to receive a payment, they say send me a check. And like this is the 300,000 SMBs that are in the US. So and then you can go a step further. I've been onto banks' websites where you're like, are you're barely using WordPress here. So like when we think about this technology that we see as so transformative, I even think about how we use AI and the people around us, they're like, I use AI to draft an email. And you're like, man, if you only knew what AI could do. So in this like growth phase, we say we're at the tip of the iceberg. Do you think we overestimate and we're a little over aggressive sometimes with how fast we think this technology will penetrate all these different, chasms of finance and businesses and personal finance? Or is this technology really that impactful that it'll accelerate it accelerate and penetrate at a much faster rate than, say, ACH and wire transfers have.
Yeah, I mean, this is a transformative like technology. I think it's the education I think is the hurdle here, right? And so like yeah, there are many friends who just use like AI for like drafting emails, but if they only knew and had the time to spend to educate themselves on how they can create workflows and like drastically reduce like time to doing like mundane things, right? And to your point about like volumes, right? Like how much agentic volume is there really today, right? And there's very little, right? The things that, there's a protocol called X402. I mean, they've shared that like about $100 million like has flowed through their agentic payment protocol in the last like 9 months or so. And so, we're
Mm,
talking millions, right? Not billions.
Yeah,
Very far
very
away.
small, very small.
Very
But what are
and
you
special.
with practically though? What you're seeing on your side, like you have now. Yeah, I can imagine coming into in a position that you're in, leading what you're leading on the business side, coming into a business like Alchemy where there are so many active deals already won. There's volumes going in all this different directions, or all these different business lines, and then you have the like emerging agentic stuff we're talking about. Like when you have gone into the pipeline, you've looked at the CRM, I'm sure seen these dashboards of what's driving like volumes and stuff. When you today think about what is possible with Alchemy and what Alchemy can do regarding agent related tooling, where do you actually see maybe today's opportunity and existing customers, or how existing customers are using this versus
mm,
tomorrow? I think that's the biggest distinction, is like, what can you do today, and maybe what companies are doing stuff today, what categories are they in versus tomorrow? Figuring that
Yes,
out is important to us, like, because there will be such a
yeah.
journey here. What does that look
super.
like?
Yeah. So, I'll frame my answer in the context of something that we actually launched because we felt like it was important to build that infrastructure. We saw some early signals and we wanted to make, an early bet on where we actually, build out infrastructure as it relates to agents. And so just a month ago, we shipped a product on, the merchant side called Agent Pay, which allows a merchant to like accept payments from agents coming via, the various protocols that exist today. And so say you're an API business and you want to accept payment from AI agents across, right, the now many growing number of these protocols. And you have to build the integration yourself. You would have to maintain the upgrades as they happen, and as the spec evolves, and then you have to do that work, all over again for the next one. So the payment protocols are X402, MPP, ACP, UCP, AP2. I mean, I can go on and on. And so, what we wanted to accomplish with Agent Pay was, look, there are some businesses, right, that literally want to sell to agents. They see some very early flow. They believe that agents will be a a primary buyer of their services, and they believe they can generate significant revenue in the years to come. And so they want to be sure that they are building for that now. And the businesses adopting it range really from established, I would say, crypto native or digital native API companies today to solo builders, right?
Mm,
And here's something I want to like really highlight and spend a little bit of time on. And it's these solar builders, because they are not traditional developers, right? They are people who can now build because AI has put the skills within their reach. In one of my conversations, like one of these solar builders tried to write his own like X402 integration to accept, stablecoin as payment for his, premium content services to agents. And he said it felt like being on a spacewalk, right? But despite that, he was able to actually do it. But he came to to use a product, Agent Pay, specifically to make the payment infrastructure build and maintenance like ongoing disappear. And so like again, very very early, I think we definitely need to keep our eyes on this like solo builder. In terms of like what they're actually building, the two categories, like again, very very early, so not of like any statistical significance, but like the two categories that we're seeing today, it's like the creative media generation tools,
Mm.
it's pulling like news via web search, paying for premium one-off article content, generating a script for like, through a model, you're producing a video, right, with a media generation tool. And then, the second is like trading, right? Trading and financial. And so again, super early.
It's so fun how we're like, I feels like we're right in the middle of both of those things, which is kind of fun. I would love to talk more about this specifically. I actually think we could be an interesting test beta user for this, maybe because of some of those creative things we're thinking through. We are Yeah, I think as a media business, a creative business, this sounds very up our alley for how we're trying to, we don't believe similar to payments and transactions. Personally, I don't believe that in 5 or 10 years with Stabledash content. I think that the majority of who will be reviewing a conversation like this will be more agents than humans, actually
Yeah.
wanting the insights from this conversation that we're having right now. So we're trying to think through that. So
Yeah.
really cool stuff.
And I'll just say, like, the use case really to call out here is micropayments, right?
Yep.
One of the original promises of the internet that you could actually pay for small amounts for things, right? Like pennies, right, for an article or for an API call. And it never really worked because one, if you're a merchant, right, just the card fees are always bigger than the thing that you're trying to sell, right? Like a flat 30-cent card transaction fee plus 2.9%, like on a 5-cent transaction doesn't make any sense. And then two, like humans don't like deciding on transactions. Like we get decision fatigue.
Yeah.
And that's why we defaulted to like bundling and subscriptions and ads and things like that.
Love it. Excited to
Well,
let's follow up on this maybe next week.
that pause there was we have more questions, but we also know what time it was. So we're actually going to be launching a segment that's more specifically focused on agentic payments. So we would love to have you back on the show in the future. And I think for this segment, we're going to probably do hour-long conversations because we always reach this point where it's like, okay, we've kind of sifted through where we're at, what we're building. Now let's go deep. I think it's great to press pause sometimes. So the next time we can jump right back into it.
Quick plug on what Zach is talking about. Agent Hour, we're going to be launching this soon, somewhere between AI and stablecoins. We're actively fielding new guest applications for this now. Chihee, maybe we can have you back on this. That could be fun to go deeper into this during that part of the program. I think we're going to be launching this in a couple weeks, so we'll follow back up with you on that. We also might have some fun, like in-person activations around that too, like dinners and stuff with other leaders in the space. So we'd love to loop you in there.
So thank you so much.
Yeah, we'll be in
Great to meet
touch.
you.
Thanks for hopping on.